I woke up gasping, my throat raw as if I'd actually been strangled. For a moment, I thought I was dead, or worse, in some kind of hellish afterlife. But no, I was lying on a rotting damp floor in the house, staring up at a sagging ceiling that looked like it had seen one too many floods. My flashlight was nowhere to be found, and the air was frigid, heavy with the stench of mildew and something else. Something metallic. Blood? I sat up, wincing, as every muscle in my body screamed at me. My head pounded like I'd been hit with a brick. The memory of the creature in the basement clawed its way back into my mind, and I scrambled to my feet, looking around like a trapped animal. The basement. I wasn't there anymore. Somehow, I'd ended up in what looked like the living room, or what was left of it. The furniture was overturned, and strange symbols were scrawled on the walls in what I really hoped wasn't blood. They weren't normal symbols either. Not your standard pentagrams or spooky runes you'd see in a B-movie. These were jagged, chaotic shapes that seemed to shift and writhe when I stared at them too long, like my brain couldn't quite process them. "Okay," I whispered to myself, my voice shaky but still trying to sound confident. "Not dead. Not dead. That's a win." That's when I noticed my phone was missing. I checked my pockets, even the stupid little watch pocket on my jeans, but no dice. Panic started to set in. My phone was my lifeline, my flashlight, my ticket to calling 911 if whatever the hell that thing was came back. And now it was gone. "All right, think," I muttered. "You're not a dumb horror protagonist. You're a slightly less dumb horror protagonist. You can get out of this." I decided to retrace my steps. First, I had to figure out how I'd gotten from the basement to the living room. The last thing I remembered was the creature grabbing my throat, its claws digging into my skin. I reached up instinctively and felt nothing. No scratches, no bruises. Weird. The air was colder now, my breath puffing out in small misty clouds. The storm outside was still raging, the wind howling like a chorus of the damned. I moved cautiously, my footsteps crunching on shattered glass and debris. The house seemed different, almost alive. The walls groaned, and the floorboards seemed to shift slightly under my weight, like the house was subtly breathing. "Cool, totally normal," I said, my voice trembling. "This is fine. Everything's fine." It took me way too long to find the basement stairs again. The layout of the house seemed to change every time I turned around, like it was messing with me. A hallway that had definitely led to the kitchen now ended in a blank wall. A door I'd sworn I'd just come through was suddenly gone. When I finally found the staircase, I hesitated. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to go back down there. But what choice did I have? My phone was probably down there, and maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined the creature. I mean, I'd hit my head at some point, right? Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Yeah, I didn't believe that either, but denial was the only thing keeping me sane. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended, each step more reluctant than the last. The air grew colder with every inch I went down, until it felt like I was walking into a freezer. My breath came out in sharp, shallow gasps, and my heart hammered in my chest like a war drum. When I reached the bottom, I froze. The creature was gone. The corner where it had crouched, where it had lunged at me with those glowing eyes and impossibly long limbs, was empty. But something was there. Something worse. A mirror. It stood propped up against the wall, its surface smeared with grime and those same jagged symbols that I'd seen upstairs. The sight of it sent a shiver down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. It was just a mirror, right? Harmless. Except it wasn't. As I stepped closer, I realized the reflection wasn't quite right. It showed the basement, sure, but it was off. The angles were wrong, like the space was stretching and twisting in ways that didn't make sense. And then I saw me. Or at least something that looked like me. My reflection stood there, staring back at me with a crooked grin that was too wide, too sharp. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, the same soulless glow I'd seen in the creature's eyes. "Okay, nope, I said, backing away. My reflection didn't move. It just kept grinning, its head tilting slowly to one side like a curious dog. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice a distorted echo of my own. I did what any rational person would do. I ran. I don't remember how I got back upstairs. 1 second, I was in the basement, my reflection taunting me from that cursed mirror. The next, I was stumbling into what used to be a bedroom, slamming the door behind me like it would actually keep anything out. The room was surprisingly intact compared to the rest of the house. The bed was still made, the sheets yellowed with age but otherwise untouched. A wardrobe stood against one wall, its doors slightly ajar. There was even a nightstand with an old dusty lamp. I collapsed onto the bed, my body shaking with adrenaline and fear. "This is insane," I muttered. "This whole house is insane." That's when I noticed the diary. It was sitting on the nightstand, a small, leather-bound book with a cracked spine. The cover was embossed with a name, Margaret. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The entries were written in a neat, looping script, the kind of handwriting you'd expect from someone who had grown up in the 1800s. The first few pages were mundane, Margaret writing about her day-to-day life, her family, her hopes and dreams. But as I flipped through, the tone began to change. June 12th, 1894. There's something wrong with this house. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but now I'm certain. The shadows move when they shouldn't. I hear whispers at night, voices calling my name. Mother says I'm being foolish, but I can see the fear in her eyes. She knows. June 20th, 1894. I saw it tonight. The creature. It came out of the mirror in the basement. Its eyes, oh God, its eyes. Father tried to stop it, but it took him. It pulled him into the mirror, and he didn't come back. My blood ran cold. The creature. The mirror. This had happened before. June 30th, 1894, it wants me next. I can feel it watching me, waiting. I don't know how much longer I can resist. If anyone finds this diary, please, burn the house down. Don't let it take you too. The final entry was smeared, the ink running as if Margaret had been interrupted, or dragged away. I snapped the diary shut, my hands trembling. Margaret hadn't made it out, and if I didn't figure out a way to escape, neither would I. I clutched the diary like it was some kind of talisman, though deep down, I knew it wasn't going to protect me from whatever was in this house. If anything, it just made me more certain that I was in serious trouble. The thought of Margaret's father being pulled into the mirror stuck in my head like a splinter. Was that what had almost happened to me? And if so, why wasn't I dead? Or worse? I needed to get out, right now. I stood up, still shaking, and glanced around the bedroom. The storm outside rattled the windows, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the house. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. It was like the house didn't want me to leave, like it was watching me. Nope, not doing this. You're not a character in a bad horror movie, dude. You're smarter than this, I muttered to myself. Talking out loud helped a little. It made me feel like I wasn't completely alone, even though I was. Or maybe I wasn't. I froze as a faint creaking noise came from the hallway outside the bedroom door. It was subtle at first, barely audible over the storm, but it grew louder, closer. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy, like whatever was out there was dragging its weight with every step. I backed away from the door, my pulse thundering in my ears. The footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. Then the doorknob started to turn. I panicked, pure animal panic. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My options weren't great. A dusty lamp, a loose bedpost, or my own fists, which were about as effective as wet noodles in a fight. The doorknob twisted all the way, and the door creaked open an inch. My breath caught. For a moment, nothing happened. The hallway beyond was pitch black, and the opening was so narrow that I couldn't see who or what was out there. Then, a hand, if you could even call it that. It reached through the gap, pale and skeletal, its fingers impossibly long and ending in jagged claws. It scraped against the doorframe, slow and deliberate, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. My stomach flipped, and I took another step back, nearly tripping over the bed. The door creaked open wider, and I caught a glimpse of the thing's face, or rather, the lack of one. Its head was smooth and featureless, except for a single slit where its mouth should have been. The slit curled into a grotesque, lopsided grin as it tilted its head at me, like it was amused by my terror. That was all I needed. Fight or flight kicked in, and I chose flight. I bolted for the window, yanking at the warped frame with all my strength. It didn't budge. Of course it didn't. The house wasn't going to make this easy. Behind me, the creature let out a low, guttural growl, and I could hear its claws scraping against the floor as it moved toward me. I didn't think. I just grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered, letting in a blast of cold, rain-soaked air. Without hesitating, I hauled myself through the jagged opening, ignoring the way the broken glass tore at my arms and legs. The creature screamed behind me, a high-pitched, inhuman wail that made my ears ring. I didn't look back. I hit the ground hard, the wet grass cushioning my fall just enough to keep me from breaking anything. Pain shot through my knees and hands, but I was alive. For now. I didn't stop running until the house was out of sight, its ominous silhouette swallowed by the storm and the gnarled trees of the surrounding forest. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking me to the bone, but I didn't care. The further I got from that house, the better. Or so I thought. As I slowed to catch my breath, leaning against a tree and clutching my side where a sharp stitch had formed, I realized something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves, just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the rain dripping through the canopy. And then, the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the wind, but no, these were voices. Faint and overlapping, too many to make out any distinct words, but all of them whispering to me. My skin crawled, and I backed away from the tree, glancing around wildly. The forest seemed to close in on me, the shadows between the trees growing darker, deeper. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" No answer, just the whispers, growing louder, closer. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound, but it was everywhere, surrounding me, inside me. My head throbbed, and I clutched at my ears, desperate to block it out. "Stop it," I shouted. "Just stop." And then they did. For a moment, there was silence, blissful, deafening silence. Then I heard the laughter. It was coming from the trees, from the shadows, from everywhere, high-pitched and childlike, but wrong. Like a distorted recording played backward. I stumbled away, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it. A figure stood in the distance, barely visible through the rain and the gloom. At first, I thought it was a person, a woman, maybe, but as I squinted, I realized it wasn't. Its limbs were too long, its posture too rigid, and it wasn't walking. It was gliding, like it didn't need to touch the ground. I turned and ran. Again. I don't know how long I ran, or how far. Time felt meaningless, my only focus on getting away from whatever was following me. The rain never let up, and the forest seemed endless, each tree looking the same as the last. I was starting to think I'd never get out when I stumbled onto something unexpected. A clearing. And in the middle of it, a village. The houses were old and weathered, their windows dark and lifeless. Smoke curled from a few of the chimneys, but I didn't see any signs of people. The whole place felt off, like it had been frozen in time. But I was desperate, exhausted, soaked to the bone. I stumbled into the nearest house, throwing the door open without hesitation. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Is anyone here?" No answer. The interior was just as strange as the exterior, furnished like it was still the 1800s, with oil lamps and ornate rugs, but everything was coated in a fine layer of dust. It looked like no one had lived here in decades, despite the smoke I'd seen from outside. And then I heard it, a familiar voice. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. It was my voice, but it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the mirror on the wall. My legs nearly gave out beneath me as I stared at the mirror. It was one of those antique ones with a thick, ornate frame that probably weighed more than me. The glass was warped with age, the edges speckled with black spots, but my reflection was perfectly clear. And it was moving. "Don't look so shocked," my reflection said, tilting its head at the same unnatural angle I'd seen the creature use. Its voice, my voice, was playful, almost mocking. "You knew this was coming." "Nope," I said, backing toward the door. "Nope, absolutely not. I am not doing this." "Oh, you're already doing it," it said, stepping closer to the glass, though I hadn't moved. Its grin stretched wider, showing far too many teeth. Way too many teeth. "You don't leave a place like this, not really." "Watch me." I turned and bolted, slamming the door behind me. I sprinted across the clearing, rain slicking my face and blurring my vision, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of that village, out of this forest, out of whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. But the village didn't end. No matter how far I ran, the houses kept appearing, one after another. the same darkened windows and smoking chimneys. I was running in circles, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I skidded to a stop, doubling over and clutching my knees as I tried to catch my breath. My head spun, and my lungs felt like they were on fire. The whispers started again, soft and insidious, threading their way into my thoughts. "You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have come here." I screamed, my voice hoarse and raw. "What do you want from me?" For a moment, the whispers stopped. Then, from behind me, a voice whispered in my ear, so close I could feel the cold breath on my neck. "We want you to stay." I spun around, swinging blindly with my fists, but there was nothing there, just rain and shadows. My breath came in panicked gasps as I turned back toward the nearest house. The door was open now, though I knew I'd closed it. The interior was pitch black, a void that seemed to suck in the light around it. And in the doorway, a figure stood waiting. No, not waiting. Watching. Its head was tilted to the side, and its body twitched and jerked like a marionette on tangled strings. "Stay," it said, its voice a garbled mix of static and the laughter I'd heard in the forest. I stumbled backward, nearly slipping in the mud. My hand scraped against something hard and cold, and I looked down to see a jagged piece of metal, a broken shovel, maybe. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I gripped it tightly and held it in front of me like a lifeline. "Stay," the figure said again, taking a step closer. Its movements were wrong, like it didn't fully understand how to control its own body. Every step it took made a wet, squelching sound, as if the ground itself was rejecting it. "I'd rather die," I spat, though my voice betrayed how terrified I was. The figure stopped, its head snapped upright, and for the first time I saw its face. Or, more accurately, the lack of one. Just like the thing in the house, its features were smooth and featureless, save for a single, too-wide grin that stretched ear to ear. "You will," it said, and then it lunged. Instinct took over. I swung the broken shovel as hard as I could, and the jagged edge connected with the creature's arm. There was a sickening crunch, like breaking glass, and the creature shrieked. Black ichor oozed from the wound, hissing and steaming as it hit the ground. But it didn't stop. The creature grabbed the shovel with its other hand, yanking it away from me with unnatural strength. I fell backward, scrambling in the mud as it loomed over me, its grin somehow growing wider. Its body convulsed, the wound in its arm already knitting itself back together. I was going to die. I knew it. And yet, some stupid, stubborn part of me refused to give up. I kicked out with both legs, catching the creature in the chest. It stumbled back, just enough for me to scramble to my feet and start running again. This time, I didn't head for the village. I ran for the trees, hoping, praying, that the forest would somehow spit me out on the other side. I didn't care where I ended up, as long as it wasn't here. The laughter followed me, echoing through the trees, mingling with the whispers that had become a constant hum in my ears. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the forest ended. I stumbled out onto a dirt road, barely keeping myself upright. Relief flooded through me as I looked around, realizing I was out of the forest. But my relief was short-lived, because there it was. The house. The same house I'd escaped from earlier, standing there like it had been waiting for me. The windows glowed faintly with a sickly yellow light, and the front door creaked open, as if inviting me in. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. No, this isn't happening." But it was. The road stretched out behind me, disappearing into the storm, but I knew better than to run. The house wasn't going to let me go. Not this time. I took a shaky step forward, then another. My body moved on its own, drawn toward the open door like a moth to a flame. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the air grew colder with every step. When I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. The house was different now. The walls were no longer crumbling, and the air no longer smelled of rot. Everything was pristine, like it had been restored to its former glory. But there was no comfort in the polished floors or the flickering candlelight. If anything, it was worse, because I wasn't alone. The creature stood at the end of the hallway, its grin impossibly wide, its eyes glowing with that same soulless light. But it wasn't alone either. Behind it, more figures emerged from the shadows, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some had faces, others didn't. All of them were grinning. "You wanted to play," my reflection said, stepping out from one of the mirrors lining the hallway. It looked exactly like me, except for the eyes, those glowing, inhuman eyes. "Now it's your turn." The figures began to close in, their grins widening, their whispers merging into a deafening roar. I stumbled back, my hands trembling as I searched for anything that could help me. And then I saw it, the diary. It was lying on the floor at my feet, open to the final page. The words seemed to glow, burning themselves into my brain. Burn the house down. It was the only way. I grabbed the diary and ran. The figures lunged for me, their claws scraping against the walls and floors, but I didn't stop. I burst into the kitchen, tearing through drawers until I found what I was looking for, a box of matches. "You can't win," my reflection said, appearing in the glass of the kitchen window. Its grin was gone now, replaced by something else. Fear. "Watch me," I said. I struck a match and dropped it onto the curtains. The fire spread quickly, devouring the old, half-dry fabric and climbing the walls. The creatures screamed, their voices blending into one agonized wail. The house shuddered around me, the walls cracking and groaning like a wounded animal. I ran for the door, smoke choking my lungs and flames licking at my heels. The last thing I heard before I burst outside was my reflection's voice, faint and furious. "This isn't over." I stood in the pouring rain, watching as the house burned. The flames roared, consuming everything, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the whispers stopped. The house collapsed in on itself, sending up a plume of black smoke that disappeared into the storm. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt safe. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in a puddle at my feet. My reflection. And it was still grinning. Thank you for tuning into my story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like the video. It helps support my channel and allows me to keep creating more content for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to comment below and share your favorite part of the story or any theories you might have. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. Your support means the world to me. And I'm excited to bring you even more thrilling stories.